The article on This is Anfield suggests that Mo Salah needs a rest. And I do think there is definitely an argument to be made that Mo Salah needs a rest. Now, when I look at our fixtures, I think there's games coming up he can be rested in. So, obviously, up next is Brentford away. He has to play in that one. Lille in the Champions League. There's no reason for Mo to start that one. None. Ipswich in the Premier League, he should start. PSV, I wouldn't even have him travel. Then we play Bournemouth, then we play Spurs, and then he won't play against Plymouth. So he'll get basically a week off till Everton. So you can basically play Mo from the next, 8 games? You can play Mo in 5 and leave him out in 3. And that's what I think should do. We don't need him to play against Lille, PSV, or Plymouth. Let him sit those games out. Let him get his rest. Because then when he comes back against Everton on February the 12th, hopefully he's refreshed. Hopefully he's back to the Mo we've seen for the vast majority of this season. And he can fire us through the next portion of the season and put us in a position to win the Premier League title. But I just think people need to take into account that it's very clear that Arna doesn't fully trust certain players in the squad. I think Tyler Morton's one of those. I think Wataru Endo's another. I think Harvey Elliott is another. And I see posts on social media saying Harvey deserves more playing time. And I have to ask, why? Why does he deserve more playing time? You see people talk about this litany of games where he allegedly came off the bench and made massive impacts. Now, there was a number of games last season, early on in the season, where he came on against tired defenses and he played well. But there's also a lot of games where he's played and done nothing. And although he hasn't played an enormous amount this season, the starts that he's had, Southampton and Accrington, he wasn't very impressive in either. And if he's not performing when he does get opportunity, and he's not making his case every single day in training to the point where the manager can't ignore it, then he doesn't deserve more playing time. Like, he just doesn't. Just because he played 50 games last season doesn't mean those 50 games were warranted. Jurgen overplayed him drastically. It's one of the big mistakes of Jurgen's tenure was that he overplayed Harvey. I've never felt that Harvey Elliott was someone that was going to establish himself long-term as a starter for us. And I have doubts that he'll be at the club next season. I think he'll want to go and play. Now, it may be that we loan him for a year and see if there's a big kick on in his development. But I would bet that if a good offer comes in the summer, we'd be willing to take it and move on. And there's no harm in that. Like, football is a transactional business. And I know we're all guilty of it, including myself. You do get really attached to certain players. But eventually everybody will move on. You know, Steven Gerrard moved on. And whether it's that they leave the club or they retire, eventually they're gone. And only certain players will play their entire career or close to it with the club. Those who are truly elite coming out of the academy. But if you look at the great players that have come out of our academy since 1990, let's say, McManaman, he left. Fowler, he left. Owen, he left. Gerrard stayed the majority, obviously. And then he left when his legs had gone. It was fine for him to leave. Carragher stayed his full career. Trent, I think, is trending towards him going. And Curtis Jones, who I don't think spends his whole career at Liverpool. So you're only looking at Carragher, who went game one to final game with us, and Gerrard, who gave us basically his entire career. That's it. In 35 years. So although it's fantastic to have academy players come through, you do get more attached to them than maybe some others that are bought in. Most of them don't stay. Most of them aren't good enough to stay. When you look down the years at others who've appeared out of our academy, like Flanagan and people like that. Now, Harvey's a much better player than Flanagan, but he's closer to Flanagan than he is to Gerrard on the talent scale. So if he moves on this summer, so be it. If the right offer came in from now, we might as well sell him because he doesn't play enough to warrant keeping him around. Same goes with Tyler Morton. If the players are at the club and not playing, sell them. Because ultimately they are assets of the football club. They are there to be traded. And if we could sell Harvey and Tyler Morton and get, I don't know, 55 to 60 million combined between them, whatever the makeup of that might be, whether it's, let's say it's 40 for Harvey and 15 for Morton or 20 for Morton. If we could sell both of them and take that 60 million and go and buy a player that's going to come in and start for us, then that's absolutely what we should do. Or take it and go and buy two players, maybe one who starts and one who will be a heavily used rotation player. Like, let's say we could sell Tyler Morton and Harvey Elliott, get the 60 million in, and let's say you go and you buy Patrick Dorgu from Lecce. Okay, let's say you go and buy him and he costs 35 million. And he can come in and he can not necessarily immediately start as your left back, but let's say he can come in and be heavily in the rotation at left back. Well, that's improving the squad. There's one player who's better than or going to be more useful than Harvey and Morton, who just don't play for us. Like, they just don't play. And then let's say you take the remainder of that money and you go out and you buy, I don't know, let's say Johnny Cardoso or Roberto Ríos. Let's take Roberto Ríos, the Colombian midfielder. Is that his name? Is it Roberto Ríos? It's Ríos, isn't it? What's this? Richard Ríos. Let's say you could buy him for 25. Well, now you'll have a midfielder that the manager might actually use. And now you've got someone that can come in and at least rotate in the defensive midfield role. Him and Gravenberch could play together, but he'd also be a really good fit with Alexis. He'd fit with Curtis in a double pivot. So let's say we did that. Or Johnny Cardoso either. Let's say we bought one of those two. And they're not coming in to be an every game starter, but they are going to come in and play. Well, we swapped two out, brought two in, but these will be players that might actually play. The only way that hits us is we lose one homegrown player in Tyler Morton, because Harvey doesn't count as homegrown yet. But we do have a space to play with, a non-homegrown space to play with, so we're good in that regard. It just might make things a bit tighter down the line, but you can fix that by selling Roberts and selling Tsimikas. There's two non-homegrown players. Bring in a young English left back, or maybe just promoting Luke Chambers or something. Going with Chambers and Scanlon as the depth behind Dorgu. And all of a sudden you've rectified that homegrown problem. But while you might look at it and say, well, I'd rather have Tyler Morton and Harvey Elliott because they're players I know and I prefer, A Richard Ríos and a Patrick Dorgu would mean more to the squad because they'd actually play. And if they play, they're much more valuable than players that are not going to play. And again, it doesn't have to be those two, they're just examples. But we need to get past this idea that just because we have a player, that means that they're better than players elsewhere. Not every Liverpool player is fantastic. Many of them could be upgraded on. There's very few of them that should be looked at as absolutely untouchable in the squad. Unfortunately for us, 3 of those that would be untouchable are out of contract in 6 months.